I was never religious, not in the way my grandmother went to church every Sunday with her rosary between her fingers. But I wasn't one of those who mocked other people's faith either. I lived my normal life in San Antonio, working at a distribution warehouse, paying rent, watching football on weekends with my buddies. I was an ordinary man, one of those who goes unnoticed on the street, who doesn't expect anything extraordinary because they learned that life is routine, exhaustion, and the occasional cold beer to forget the heat of the day. But there was one damn night last August, when everything I believed about the world, about God, about ourselves, crumbled like a sandcastle before the sea. What I'm going to tell you isn't something I can prove. I don't have photos or videos. I don't have witnesses to back up every detail. I only have my memory and this weight in my chest that hasn't let me breathe properly since then. If you've ever felt small, insignificant, like an ant before the universe, then maybe you can understand a little of what I experienced. Maybe you can understand why I'm here, trying to put into words something that seems to escape language itself, something that changed me forever, and that no matter how much time passes, I know I will never be able to forget. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays were always slow at the warehouse, those days when time seems to drag, and you count the hours until you can go home. I had finished my shift around 10 at night, later than usual because we had received a delayed shipment that needed to be organized before the next day. The parking lot was almost empty, just my old pickup truck and a couple of other vehicles belonging to the night security guys. The Texas sky was clear, full stars in a way you don't often see in the city. And I remember stopping for a moment before getting in the truck, just looking up, breathing in that hot night air that smells like asphalt and mesquite. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. Maybe about what I was going to eat when I got home, maybe about the game I had missed that afternoon. Trivial things that fill our minds when we're tired and just want to rest. I got in the truck, turned on the engine, and started driving toward the highway. The route I always took was simple, about 20 minutes of straight road through an area that was half industrial, half empty fields, one of those places on the outskirts of the city where development hasn't quite reached yet. There were few streetlights, and the darkness of the night was dense, broken only by my headlights and the occasional passing car going in the opposite direction. I had driven that road hundreds of times. I knew every curve, every pothole, every landmark. But that night, about 5 minutes into my drive, something made me look up through the windshield. At first I thought it was a plane, maybe a helicopter, something normal that could be explained, with simple logic. There was a light in the sky, not very high, maybe at the height of a 10-story building, and it was moving slowly from east to west, parallel to the highway. But there was something wrong with that light, something my brain couldn't quite process at first. It wasn't blinking like plane lights do. It wasn't making any sound, and its movement was too smooth, too deliberate, as if it were sliding through the air instead of flying. I slowed down, not really knowing why, feeling a chill run down my spine despite the heat that still radiated from the asphalt. The light was bright, but not blinding, a white color that tended toward blue, and as I kept watching it while driving, I realized it was getting closer. My heart started beating faster, that kind of fear that grabs you by the throat without you really understanding why. A primal fear that makes you want to run even when you don't know what you're running from. I thought about accelerating, getting home as fast as possible and forgetting what I was seeing. But something inside me, something I still don't understand, made me pull over to the shoulder instead. I stopped the truck, turned off the engine, and sat there, in the darkness, watching that light descend slowly toward the empty field to my right. My hands were shaking. I remember gripping the steering wheel hard to try to control them, breathing deeply and telling myself this had to have a logical explanation, that it was probably some military drone or something like that. Nothing to be afraid of. But the light kept descending, and when it was about 30 feet above the ground, I could see that it wasn't just a light. There was a shape around it, something circular or oval, hard to define because the light seemed to distort the edges, as if the object were wrapped in some kind of energy field that made the air around it vibrate. And then, without warning, without any sound, it landed in the field, about 100 yards from where I had parked. The light dimmed a bit, enough for me to see the silhouette of the object more clearly. It was big, maybe the size of a house, with a smooth surface that seemed to reflect the starlight in a way that shouldn't have been possible, as if it were made of liquid metal or something my eyes couldn't quite interpret correctly. I sat there frozen in the truck, not knowing what to do, not knowing if I should start the engine and get out of there, or if my curiosity, that damn human curiosity that has gotten us into trouble since the beginning of time, was going to make me stay. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 10. I lost track of time because my mind was racing 1,000 miles an hour trying to process what I was seeing, trying to find a logical explanation that would calm the terror growing in my chest. And then, from the base of that object, a section opened up, not like a door that swings on hinges, but like the surface itself had simply decided to become liquid and create an opening. A softer light came out of that opening, a warm golden color that contrasted with the cold blue-white of before, and a figure began to emerge. I want to be clear about something. I don't know what I saw that night. I can't say with certainty that it was an extraterrestrial being because I don't have proof. I can't confirm anything beyond my own experience. But what I saw walk out of that object wasn't human. That much I can say. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with a slender body and proportions that were slightly off, arms a bit too long, a head a bit too large for the body. The skin, if you could call it that, had a grayish tone that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, and the eyes, those eyes that I will never be able to forget, were large and completely black, like 2 pools of absolute darkness in which you could lose yourself if you looked too long. The being stood there at the entrance of that opening for a moment, as if observing the surroundings, and then it started walking toward my truck. Each step was fluid, graceful in a way that seemed unnatural, as if gravity didn't affect it the same way it affects us. My first instinct was to start the truck and get out of there as fast as I could, but I found that I couldn't move, not because something was holding me physically, but because my own body had stopped responding to my will. It was like being paralyzed by fear, that state where your mind screams at you to run, but your muscles simply refuse to obey. The being approached until it was right next to my window, and when it looked at me, when those black eyes fixed on mine, I felt something I had never experienced before and hope never to experience again. It was as if that being could see directly into my soul, as if it could read every thought, every memory, every secret I had kept even from myself. There was no hatred in that gaze, no malice, but there wasn't compassion either, not in the way we humans understand it. It was a gaze of pure observation, clinical, detached, as if I were a specimen under a microscope. And then, without the being opening its mouth, without any sound coming out of it, I heard a voice in my head. It wasn't a voice like when you hear someone talk. It wasn't sound vibrating in the air and reaching your ears. It was more like thoughts that weren't mine appearing fully formed in my mind, clear and precise, in a language that I could understand perfectly even though I knew it wasn't English or Spanish or any human language. The voice said, "We have been watching you for a long time, longer than your species has kept records, longer than your oldest civilizations remember. We have seen you rise and fall, build and destroy, love and hate with an intensity that fascinates us and terrifies us in equal measure. And now we come with a message, one last message before we leave and never return to this world." I wanted to ask why. Why me? Why now? But I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move my lips to form words. The being seemed to understand my confusion, my terror, and it continued. You are not special. You were not chosen for any particular virtue or sin. You are simply here, in this place, at this moment, and that is enough. What I am going to tell you is not meant for you alone. It is meant for all of humanity. But it will be up to you to decide what to do with this information, whether to share it or keep it locked inside you until the day you die. The being lifted one of its long hands and pointed toward the sky, toward the stars that shone above us in the darkness of the night. Out there, in the vastness of space that you can barely begin to imagine, there are thousands of civilizations, millions of worlds where life has taken forms so diverse that your mind could not comprehend them. Some of these civilizations are older than the universe itself, having transcended the limitations of time and space in ways that would seem like magic to you. Others are young, barely learning to reach beyond their own atmospheres, taking their first uncertain steps into the cosmic ocean. And among all these civilizations, among all these worlds, yours is unique in one particular way. The voice paused, and I felt my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. The being lowered its hand and looked at me again with those unfathomable eyes. Your species has something that no other civilization we have encountered possesses, a capacity for self. Deception so profound, so complete, that you can believe in contradictory truths simultaneously and never question the inconsistency. You can see evidence right in front of you and choose to ignore it if it doesn't fit your preconceived worldview. You can commit atrocities in the name of love, destroy in the name of creation, and convince yourselves that you are doing good even as you cause immeasurable suffering. I felt anger rising within me, mixed with the fear and confusion. Who was this being to judge us, to come here and tell us we were flawed, we were wrong? But before I could form that thought completely, the voice responded as if it had read my mind. We are not judging you. We are simply observing what is evident. Every civilization has its flaws, its contradictions, but yours has elevated contradiction to an art form, and nowhere is this more apparent than in your religions, in your desperate attempts to find meaning in a universe that offers none. The being made a gesture with its hand, and suddenly I wasn't in my truck anymore. I was floating, suspended in a dark space without reference points, without up or down, without anything to anchor me. And there, in that darkness, images began to appear, vivid and clear as if I were living them myself. I saw ancient civilizations, peoples I didn't recognize, building temples and monuments to gods that looked suspiciously like the being standing before me. I saw primitive humans kneeling before lights in the sky, interpreting our visits as divine interventions, as miracles, as signs from the heavens. I saw how our presence shaped your myths, your legends, your religions, and then I saw him. I saw a man in ancient robes, walking through the dusty streets of a Middle Eastern city 2,000 years ago. I saw his face, kind and tired, marked by the sun and the hardship of a life lived among the poor and the outcast. I saw him teach, heal, comfort those who suffered. And I saw the being next to me, or others like it, watching from the shadows, observing this man with an interest that went beyond mere scientific curiosity. The voice spoke again. The one you call Jesus, the one around whom you have built one of your largest religions, was remarkable among your kind. He possessed a level of compassion and understanding that was rare in his time and remains rare even now. But he was not divine. He was not the son of any god, because there are no gods, not in the way you understand them. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I wanted to reject them, wanted to tell this being it was wrong, that it didn't understand, that there was more to existence than what it could observe with its alien eyes. But the images kept coming, relentless and undeniable. I saw Jesus in the garden, in his final hours, and I saw one of these beings approach him, invisible to human eyes but clear as day in this vision. I saw them communicate, not with words but with that same telepathic transfer of thoughts that I was experiencing now. I saw Jesus learn the truth, saw the moment when everything he believed, everything he had taught, was revealed to be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. The being showed me Jesus' reaction, and what I saw there broke something inside me. There was no anger, no despair, no rejection of this terrible knowledge. Instead, there was acceptance, a profound sadness mixed with an unwavering compassion. Even knowing the truth, even understanding that the Divine Father he had prayed to was nothing more than a psychological construct created by an evolving species desperate for meaning, he chose to continue his path. He chose to let himself be captured, to let himself be tortured, to let himself be killed, not because he was sacrificing himself for humanity's sins, but because he understood that the message of love and compassion he had been teaching was valuable regardless of whether it came from a divine source or from the simple human heart. We told him everything, the voice continued. We showed him the vastness of the universe, the emptiness where he expected to find God, the cold mathematical reality of existence without purpose or design. And do you know what he said to us? He said that it didn't matter. He said that if love and compassion had no cosmic significance, if they were just chemical reactions in the brain, products of evolution with no transcendent meaning, then that made them even more precious, because it meant that humans chose to love and to be compassionate, despite there being no divine reward, no eternal paradise waiting for them. He said that was the real miracle, not walking on water or rising from the dead, but choosing kindness in a meaningless universe. The vision ended abruptly, and I was back in my truck, gasping for air as if I had been drowning, tears streaming down my face without me realizing I had been crying. The being was still there, standing by my window, motionless and patient. Your religions, the voice said, are built on misunderstandings, on our visits interpreted as divine, intervention, on natural phenomena given supernatural explanations. But that doesn't make them worthless. The human need for meaning, for connection, for something greater than yourselves, that is real even if the objects of your worship are not. The problem is that you have used these misunderstandings to justify division, violence, hatred. You have killed in the name of gods that do not exist, waged wars over interpretations of texts written by men trying to make sense of things they couldn't understand. I found my voice finally, hoarse and broken. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to say, the words barely a whisper. "Why now?" The being tilted its head in a gesture that might have been the alien equivalent of sadness. "Because we are leaving, and we are never coming back. We have watched you for millennia, hoping that you would evolve beyond your violent tribalism, beyond your need for comforting lies. But we have seen the pattern repeat too many times across too many worlds. Some species make it, they transcend their primitive instincts and become something greater. Others destroy themselves before they reach that point. We believe your species is approaching a critical juncture, a moment where you will either evolve or self-destruct, and we wanted to give you one last piece of information before we go." "What information?" I asked, not sure I wanted to hear the answer. The being raised its hand again, and I felt something shift in my mind, as if a door I didn't know existed had suddenly opened. Jesus was right, not about the theology, not about the divine sacrifice, but about the fundamental message. Love and compassion are the only things that matter in a universe without inherent meaning. If your species is to survive, if you are to become something more than violent primates fighting over resources and ideologies, you must let go of the comforting lies and embrace the uncomfortable truth. There is no cosmic plan, no divine judgment, No afterlife where the good are rewarded and the evil are punished. There is only this life, this moment, this choice to be kind or cruel, to build or destroy, to love or hate. The words echoed in my mind, and I felt something inside me crumble and rebuild itself at the same time. The being stepped back from my truck. We have given you technology without you realizing it, pushed you forward in moments when you were on the brink of extinction, whispered inspiration into the minds of your greatest thinkers and artists. But we can do no more. The rest is up to you. Take this message or don't. Share it or keep it to yourself. Believe it or reject it. It changes nothing about the reality of your situation. You are alone in a vast and indifferent universe, and the only meaning your lives have is the meaning you create for yourselves. The being turned and walked back toward the object in the field, its movements still unnaturally graceful and fluid. I watched it disappear into that golden opening, watched the surface close behind it, as if it had never been open at all. The light intensified again, that cold blue-white that hurt to look at directly, and the object began to rise, slowly at first and then faster, until it was just a point of light among the stars. And then, nothing at all. I sat there in my truck for what might have been hours, engine off, staring at the empty field where the object had been, trying to process what had just happened, trying to decide if I had lost my mind or if I had just experienced something that would change me forever. ¿Alguna vez te has sentido completamente perdido, como si todo en lo que creías se hubiera desmoronado en un instante? ¿Has vivido algo que no sabes cómo explicar? ¿Algo que te cambió desde adentro? Déjame tu comentario. Me gustaría saber que no estoy solo en esto. Escribe. Viví algo que no puedo explicar. Eventually, I started the truck and drove home, moving on autopilot, my mind still replaying every moment of that encounter, every word that had been placed in my thoughts. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black eyes staring into my soul, heard that voice, telling me that everything I had believed about the universe was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. I thought about my grandmother with her rosary, about the peace her faith gave her, and I wondered if I should tell her what I had learned, if I should take that comfort away from her. And I realized I couldn't. I realized that maybe the being was right. Maybe the comforting lies were necessary for some people. Maybe not everyone was meant to face the cold reality of a meaningless universe. The next few days were torture. I went to work, went through the motions of my normal life, but inside I was screaming, trying to reconcile what I had experienced with the world I thought I knew. I researched everything I could find about UFO encounters, about alien contact, looking for someone else who had experienced something similar, someone who could tell me I wasn't crazy. I found stories, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, but none of them talked about what I had been told. None of them mentioned that final message about Jesus, about religion, about the nature of meaning and existence. Most of the stories were about abductions, experiments, warnings about nuclear weapons, or environmental destruction. Important topics, sure, but nothing that shook the foundations of human belief the way my encounter had. I tried to talk to a priest, went to confession for the first time in 15 years, sat in that small, dark booth and tried to find the words to explain what I had experienced. But when I opened my mouth, when I tried to tell him about the being and the message, I found I couldn't. Not because something was preventing me physically, but because I looked at this old man in his robes, this man who had dedicated his entire life to serving a God that might not exist, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy his world the way mine had been destroyed. So instead, I confessed to smaller sins, to anger and laziness and lustful thoughts, and I accepted his penance and his blessing, and I walked out of that church feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I started having dreams, vivid nightmares where I was back in that field, back in my truck,
But this time, when the being approached and told me its message, I could respond, I could argue, I could demand proof and explanations. In these dreams, I would scream at the being, tell it that it was wrong, that it didn't understand humans, that faith and hope and love meant something beyond chemistry and evolution. And the being would just look at me with those expressionless black eyes and repeat the same message over and over until I woke up sweating and shaking, my heart racing like I had been running for my life. My friends noticed something was wrong. I stopped going to the weekend football games, stopped hanging out at the bar after work, started avoiding social situations where I might have to pretend everything was normal. One of my buddies, Miguel, cornered me one day in the warehouse, asked me straight up what was going on, if I was sick or if I had problems at home or what. I wanted to tell him, wanted to share this burden with someone, anyone, but how do you explain something like that? How do you say, hey man, I met an alien who told me Jesus was just a really compassionate guy who got caught up in a cosmic misunderstanding without sounding completely insane? So I lied. I told Miguel I was fine, just tired, working too much, not sleeping well. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but he let it go, told me to take care of myself and offered to cover some of my shifts if I needed time off. I thanked him and went back to work, moving boxes and filling orders and trying not to think about the fact that everything I did, everything everyone around me did, was ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things. We were all just animals on a rock floating through space, creating elaborate stories to convince ourselves our lives mattered, when the truth was that the universe didn't care whether we existed or not. The really disturbing part, the part that kept me awake night after night, wasn't just what the being had told me about Jesus and religion. It was what it had implied about the nature of reality itself. If beings that advanced, beings that could travel between stars and read minds and show you visions of the past, if they had explored the universe and found no evidence of anything divine, no cosmic purpose, no transcendent meaning, then what hope did we have of ever finding it? We humans, barely able to leave our own planet, still fighting wars over patches of dirt and differences in ideology, we were supposed to create our own meaning in a meaningless universe. It seemed like a cosmic joke, like we had been set up to fail from the beginning. I thought a lot about what the being had shown me, about Jesus in that final conversation, about his choice to continue his path even knowing the truth. There was something profound in that, something that my traumatized mind kept returning to. If Jesus could choose compassion and love even in the face of a meaningless universe, even knowing there was no divine reward waiting for him, then maybe that was the real lesson. Maybe the being hadn't come to destroy my faith but to clarify it, to strip away the supernatural elements and leave only what was essential, the choice to be kind in an unkind universe, the choice to love when love has no cosmic significance. But accepting that was harder than I can express. It meant letting go of the comfort of believing someone was watching over me, that my grandmother's prayers actually reached someone who cared, that when I died, there would be something waiting beyond the darkness. It meant accepting that when my parents died, they hadn't gone to a better place, they had simply ceased to exist, their consciousnesses dissolving like smoke in the wind. It meant that all the suffering in the world, all, the pain and injustice and cruelty, it wasn't part of some grand plan, it wasn't necessary for some greater good, it was just random chaos, the natural result of a universe that operated on physics and chemistry, with no moral dimension whatsoever. I started researching philosophy, trying to find thinkers who had grappled with these questions, who had tried to find meaning without relying on the supernatural. I read Camus and Sartre, learned about existentialism and absurdism, about the idea that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, even as he pushes his boulder up the mountain knowing it will roll back down.
I read about Buddhist concepts of enlightenment through accepting the impermanent nature of existence, about Stoic ideas of finding peace by accepting what we cannot control. None of it gave me the comfort I was looking for, but it helped me understand that I wasn't the first person to face these questions, that humans had been struggling with the apparent meaninglessness of existence long before an alien showed up to confirm their worst fears. Months passed, and slowly, painfully, I started to build a new framework for understanding my life. I went back to work consistently, started seeing my friends again, began participating in the world even though I knew that world was just a thin veneer of meaning over an empty void. And strangely, knowing that nothing I did mattered in any cosmic sense, made me more careful about how I treated people. If this was all if there was no afterlife where wrongs would be righted and justice would prevail, then it was even more important to be kind now, in this moment, because this moment was all anyone had. I started volunteering at a local food bank, helping to distribute meals to people who were struggling. I didn't do it because I thought God would reward me, or because I believed in karma or any of that. I did it because I had looked into the face of an alien being and learned that the universe was cold and empty, and I didn't want to make that universe even colder. I did it because some man 2,000 years ago had chosen compassion even after learning the same truth I had learned, and if he could make that choice, then so could I. My grandmother passed away about 6 months after my encounter. She died peacefully in her sleep, rosary still in her hands, surrounded by family, secure in her belief that she was going home to be with God. At her funeral, the priest talked about her unwavering faith, about how she was surely in heaven now, watching over all of us, and I sat there in the pew, tears running down my face, not because I believed any of what he was saying, but because I was grateful that she had never known the truth, that she had died with her comforting beliefs intact. The being had shown me that those beliefs were based on misunderstandings, but it had also taught me that sometimes the misunderstandings were kinder than the reality. I still think about that night constantly, still turn it over in my mind, examining it from every angle, looking for alternative explanations. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe it was a mental break brought on by stress and exhaustion. Maybe the being wasn't what it appeared to be. Maybe it was lying or confused or operating on such a different level of existence that its truths weren't applicable to human reality. I've considered all these possibilities, turned them over and over, but deep down I know what I experienced was real. I know because of how it changed me, because of how it shattered and rebuilt my understanding of everything. The hardest part isn't living with the knowledge that there's no God, no divine plan, no cosmic justice. The hardest part is watching other people go about their lives, secure in their beliefs, and knowing that those beliefs are comforting lies. It's people pray for help that will never come. Watching them thank God for good fortune that was just random chance. Watching them blame demonic forces for tragedies that were just the result of an indifferent universe. And it's knowing that I can't tell them the truth, that even if I tried, they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they would believe me, and it would destroy them the way it nearly destroyed me. Sometimes I wonder why the being chose to tell me about Jesus specifically. It could have talked about Buddha or Muhammad, or any of the other religious figures that have shaped human history. But it chose Jesus, and I think maybe that was because Jesus represents something unique in human religious history. He wasn't primarily a lawgiver like Moses or a warrior like Muhammad. He was, according to the being's message, simply a man who understood that compassion mattered, even in a meaningless universe, who chose love even knowing there was no divine father to reward him for it. Maybe the being knew that message would resonate with someone like me, raised in a culture steeped in Christian imagery and values, even if I wasn't particularly devout. Or maybe it was random. Maybe I'm trying to find meaning in the being's choice of topics when there was no meaning there either. Maybe it just told me what it thought would be most disruptive to human belief systems, what would shake our foundations most effectively. If that was the goal, it succeeded. I can't look at a church anymore without thinking about what I was shown, can't hear people talk about their faith without remembering those visions of Jesus learning the truth and choosing compassion anyway. I've tried to write this all down several times, tried to create a record of what happened and what I was told, thinking maybe someday humanity will be ready to hear it. But every time I start, I realize how insane it sounds, how easily it can be dismissed as the ravings of a disturbed mind. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe I did have a mental break, maybe the stress and the loneliness and the existential fear that lurks in all of us finally bubbled up and created this elaborate fiction. But if that's true, if I imagined the whole thing, then why does it feel more real than anything else I've experienced? Why can I still see those black eyes so clearly, still hear that voice in my head, still feel the way my understanding of reality shifted in that moment? I've also wondered about the being's final statement, that they were leaving and never coming back. If they've been watching us for millennia, guiding us, pushing us forward, what happens now that they're gone? Are we truly alone, left to figure out our own destiny without any outside intervention? And is that a gift or a curse? Part of me thinks it's a gift, that we'll finally be free to develop on our own terms, without cosmic parents looking over our shoulders. But another part of me is terrified, because we've shown time and, again, that when left to our own devices, we tend toward violence and destruction. The being said we were approaching a critical juncture, a point where we would either evolve or destroy ourselves. I see that happening now. See the world becoming more polarized, more divided, more willing to embrace comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. I see people retreating into their tribal identities, into their religious certainties, into their ideological bubbles, and I wonder if we're going to make it. I wonder if the being's final message will make any difference at all, if knowing the truth about our religions and our cosmic insignificance will help us or hurt us in the long run. There are days when I wish I could forget, when I wish I could go back to being the simple man I was before that night, worrying about mundane things like rent and football scores and whether my truck would make it through another inspection. But I can't unknow what I know, can't unsee what I've seen. The being opened a door in my mind, and there's no closing it again. All I can do is try to live with this knowledge, try to apply its lessons in whatever small ways I can, try to choose compassion and kindness even when everything in me wants to scream at the unfairness of it all. I think about the message constantly, about what it means for humanity if it's true. If our religions are based on misunderstandings of alien contact, if there's no God watching over us, no afterlife waiting beyond death, then everything we've built our moral systems on collapses. Or does it? Maybe the being was right. Maybe the message is more important than the messenger. Maybe love and compassion have value even if they're not cosmically mandated. Maybe choosing to be good without the promise of heaven or the threat of hell is actually more admirable than being good because you think someone is keeping score. But it's hard, God, it's hard, to live without that comfort, without that sense that someone is watching, that things will ultimately work out, that suffering serves a purpose. It's hard to look at the vastness of space, at the billions of galaxies stretching out to infinity, and accept that we're just an accident, a random coalescence of matter that happened to become self-aware for a brief cosmic moment before dissolving back into the void. It's hard to accept that when I die there won't be any reunion with my parents or my grandmother, that I'll just cease to exist, my consciousness winking out like a candle in the wind. I've talked to a therapist about some of this, carefully editing the story to make it sound like an existential crisis rather than an alien encounter. She's tried to help me find meaning through human connection, through relationships and work and creative expression. And those things do help. They give me something to hold on to when the darkness feels overwhelming. But they don't change the fundamental truth that was revealed to me that night. They don't make the universe any less empty, or my existence any less temporary. Sometimes I think the being was cruel, that giving me this knowledge without any way to verify it or share it or do anything meaningful with it was a form of torture. But other times I think maybe it was a gift. Maybe I'm being given a chance to live more authentically, more honestly, without the comfortable lies that most people use to get through their days. Maybe the being saw something in me that made it think I could handle this truth, that I wouldn't completely fall apart or hurt myself or lose my mind entirely. I haven't, for what it's worth. I'm still here, still functioning, still going to work and paying my bills and trying to be a decent person. But I'm changed, fundamentally and irreversibly changed, and there's no going back to who I was before. The man who drove that route from the warehouse on that August night is gone, replaced by someone who carries a burden of knowledge that feels too heavy to bear, but too important to put down. The being said it was leaving me with a choice, to share the message or keep it to myself. For a long time I chose to keep it locked inside, convinced that nobody would believe me anyway, that sharing it would only mark me as crazy or disturbed. But the weight of carrying it alone has become too much, and I find myself needing to release it somehow, to put it out into the world and let others decide what to make of it. Maybe someone will read this and recognize their own doubts and fears. Maybe someone will find in it the same strange comfort I eventually found, the idea that choosing to be good without cosmic reward is actually the highest form of morality. Or maybe everyone will dismiss it as fiction, as the creative writing of someone with too much time on their hands and too vivid an imagination. That's okay too. The being said it didn't matter whether I shared the message or not, that it would change nothing about humanity's situation. We're still alone in a vast universe, still facing a critical juncture in our development, still choosing every day whether to embrace love and compassion or hate and destruction. The only difference is that now I know the choice is truly ours, that there's no divine intervention coming to save us, that we have to save ourselves or accept the consequences of our failures. I still drive that same route from the warehouse sometimes, still pass by that field where the object landed. I've stopped there a few times, walked out into the scrub grass, looking for some sign that it really happened, some physical evidence that would prove I didn't imagine the whole thing. But there's nothing, just dirt and grass and the occasional piece of trash blown in by the wind. The universe has left no trace of that encounter, no mark on the physical world to verify my experience. All I have is my memory and this story, and the strange peace I've found in accepting that this might be all there is. If Jesus could choose love in a meaningless universe, if he could go to his death knowing there was no divine plan, no resurrection waiting, no cosmic justice to balance the scales, then maybe I can choose to live with the same commitment to compassion. Maybe that's the real message the being wanted, to convey, not that our religions are wrong, but that the core principle of treating each other with kindness and dignity stands regardless of whether it comes from God or from our own recognition that we're all in this meaningless existence together. I don't know if I'll ever have another encounter, if the beings will change their minds and come back, if there's more to learn, or if that was it, one message and then eternal silence. Part of me hopes they return, hopes I'll get another chance to ask the questions that have plagued me since that night, to demand clarification or proof or something, more substantial than visions and telepathic communications. But another part of me knows it doesn't matter, that even if they came back and explained everything in perfect detail, it wouldn't change the fundamental reality of my situation. I would still be a finite being in an infinite universe, still searching for meaning in a cosmos that offers none, still choosing between compassion and cruelty with only my own conscience to guide me. What haunts me most isn't the knowledge that there's no God. It's the knowledge that there were beings who could have been gods to us, who had the power and the technology to shape our development, who watched us struggle and suffer for millennia, and who ultimately decided we weren't worth saving. They gave us occasional pushes, whispered inspirations, allowed us to misinterpret their visits as divine intervention, but they never revealed themselves fully, never gave us the gift of certainty that would have transformed our civilization. And now they're leaving, abandoning us to our fate, taking with them whatever wisdom and knowledge they could have shared. Unless that was the point. Unless the final lesson was that we need to learn, to stand on our own, to create our own meaning, to take responsibility for our own future without looking to the skies for salvation. Maybe that's what the being meant when it said the rest was up to us, that we had been given everything we needed, and now it was time to either use it or lose it. Maybe the final act of compassion from these cosmic observers was to leave us alone, to force us to grow up and face reality without the comfort of believing someone more powerful was watching over us. I think about this every day, turn it over in my mind during the long hours at work, in the quiet, moments before sleep, in the space between one breath and the next. I think about Jesus choosing love, about humanity standing at a crossroads, about aliens watching from the stars and deciding we're not worth their time anymore. And I think about what I'm supposed to do with this knowledge, how I'm supposed to live in a world that suddenly seems smaller and lonelier than it did before. The answer I keep coming back to is simple, even if executing it is anything but. I keep going. I keep choosing kindness when I can. Keep trying to reduce suffering where I find it. Keep treating other people as if they matter, even though I know in the grand scheme of things, we're all just temporary arrangements of matter that will eventually dissolve back into the cosmic soup. I keep living as if meaning exists, even though I know it doesn't, because the alternative is despair, and despair serves no one. Maybe that makes me a hypocrite, living a lie even after being shown the truth. Or maybe it makes me human, choosing hope and connection over the cold logic of an indifferent universe. The being said humans were unique in our capacity for self-deception, for believing contradictory things simultaneously. Maybe this is my version of that. Believing in meaningless meaning, finding purpose in purposelessness, choosing to act as if my actions matter even when I know they don't. I wish I could say this story has a happy ending, that receiving this knowledge led to some great revelation or transformation that made everything worthwhile. But the truth is messier than that. Most days I'm okay, functional, going through the motions of life with a strange detachment that wasn't there before. Some days I'm not okay. I wake up with that crushing sense of cosmic loneliness, that knowledge that we're truly alone out here, and I have to force myself to get out of bed and face another day of pretending it all means something. But I keep going, because that's what we do. We humans, with our stubborn insistence on survival, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that nothing matters, keep going because the alternative is unthinkable, because somewhere deep in our evolutionary programming is a drive to continue, to persist, to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when the path leads nowhere in particular. And sometimes, on good days, I can almost see the beauty in it. The absurd courage of a species that creates meaning in a meaningless universe, that chooses love when love has no cosmic significance, that fights for justice when justice is just a human concept with no basis in natural law. We're artists painting on a canvas that will eventually burn, musicians playing songs that will echo into eternal silence, storytellers crafting narratives that will be forgotten when the last human brain stops firing. And we do it anyway, because we're too stubborn, or too stupid, or too wonderfully human to let the meaninglessness stop us. If you've read this far, if you've followed me through this long, strange journey into the heart of existential uncertainty, then maybe you understand a little of what I'm feeling. Maybe you've had your own moment of cosmic vertigo, your own encounter with the possibility that everything you believed was wrong. Or maybe you're secure in your faith, confident in your worldview, and you're reading this as nothing more than an interesting fiction, a thought experiment to consider and then dismiss. Either way, I want you to know something. Whether there are gods or aliens or nothing at all watching over us, whether the universe has meaning or is just random chaos, whether we're part of some grand design or just cosmic accidents, none of that changes the fact that we're here, now, in this moment, capable of choosing how we treat each other. The being told me that was the only thing that mattered, and even though everything else it said filled me with existential dread, that part gave me something to hold on to. So I choose to believe not in God or aliens or any external source of meaning, but in the human capacity to create meaning through connection, through compassion, through the simple act of acknowledging each other's existence and deciding it matters. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough because it's all we have. The being is gone, humanity is alone, and the universe spins on indifferent to our struggles and our triumphs. But we're still here, still choosing, still capable of love and kindness and all those things that make existence bearable even when it seems unbearable. And if that's not a miracle, if that's just chemistry and evolution and random chance, then I'd argue it's even more remarkable, because it means we did this ourselves. We created beauty and meaning in a universe that offered neither. That's what I hold on to now, in the long nights when the knowledge of cosmic emptiness threatens to overwhelm me. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning and back to work, and through another day of this strange existence we call life. Not faith in anything external, but faith in us, in our ability to keep going despite knowing the truth, in our stubborn insistence on meaning in a meaningless universe. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the being wanted me to understand all along. So here I am, sharing this story, putting it out into the world for whatever it's worth. Maybe you'll believe it, maybe you won't. Maybe it will change something in how you see the world, or maybe you'll forget about it 5 minutes after you finish reading. That's okay. That's the point, actually. We all get to choose what we do with the information we receive, how we integrate it into our understanding of reality, whether we let it transform us or bounce off us like water off stone. I made my choice. I chose to keep going, to keep trying, to keep believing in the value of human connection, even when I know it's temporary and ultimately meaningless in any cosmic sense. I chose to honor the memory of Jesus choosing compassion, even after learning the truth, to follow the example of a man who lived 2,000 years ago and who, according to an alien being, understood something fundamental about human existence that most of us still haven't grasped. If you felt something reading this, if any of it resonates with your own questions and doubts and fears, then leave a comment below. Tell me about your own experiences with the unknown, your own struggles with meaning and purpose. Let's create a community of people who are willing to face the darkness together, who can support each other through the existential crisis of being human in an indifferent universe. Click that like button if this story touched you in any way, and subscribe because I might share more of my journey, more of what I've learned about living with this knowledge. Write in the comments, I experienced something unexplainable. Let's talk about it. Let's be honest with each other about the fear and the wonder and the terrible beauty of existence. Because if we're all alone in this universe, if there's no cosmic parent watching over us, then the least we can do is watch over each other, is choose connection over isolation, is decide that even if nothing matters in the end, it matters right now, in this moment, to this person. And maybe that's enough to keep going for one more day.